Welcome to Turf's award-winning showroom here at the Merchandise Mart in Chicago. I'm Rajagopal, I'm the editor-in-chief of Metropolis, and we're going to talk about how sound, sight, and experience can all come together in space. And I can think of no better person to do that than Faraz at Turf. Faraz, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Avi.
So, Faraz, tell us about the space we're in. It's so fantastic. It's colorful, it's soulful, it's emotional. Why do I feel that way?
This year, we've brought the mood down. So we've painted the ceiling black. We've brought in these layers of additive color. So we're doing like double, triple layers. We've kind of created this whole sensory experience where you have light and sound and texture that touch on all 5 senses. So we're trying to just craft this really curated experience where you're bringing yourself into the space and it doesn't feel like you're at NeoCon. It doesn't feel like you're at the Mart.
I think that's what I love about what you do at Turf. You guys are so focused on sound as a manufacturer of acoustic products, but you understand that all the sensors work together.
Yes.
You can't design for sound unless you design for everything else. And I think you give designers a way to do that, and that's absolutely fantastic. The space, of course, we're in, designed by HDR, and it won IIDA Best Large Showroom, Best in Competition this year. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Let's go through the space.
Wonderful. So instead of treating this like a showroom where you've got the entire breadth of the offering, we're actually doing something very curated and focused and trying to demonstrate how can you take something maybe very simple or affordable and elevate that by doing something interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, this is just our slab baffle, right? Very simple, basic, folded baffle, but we've taken it and customized it to where we're doing 2 and 3 layers to kind of create this additive color. We've taken that same grid, projected it on the floor, so every single line and detail aligns with what's happening in the ceiling and what's happening in the wall. On the walls, we have just, again, a very simple product. This is tubular, right? And a custom carve, but what we're doing is integrating lighting so that you get a little bit more visual texture. So this is this expansion and contraction of this visual texture on the walls, but it really helps to kind of make it feel a little bit more dramatic instead of something that's very evenly lit. So we're getting that visual interest from the lighting that really makes you feel like this is something special.
Your product is so much about modulating sound. There's also a way that the experience feels really thoughtful, but really well defined.
Yes.
And I think that's the magic of having really great acoustic performance combined with your thoughtful use of color.
Yes.
And design dimensions.
Absolutely. Like, whenever you walk in, especially if you come out in the showroom from the hallway, we like to say this is a little bit like a hug of quiet, right? Everything, almost every surface has either, soft upholstery, we've got carpet, but then obviously like all of our acoustic material. So all of that echo, all of that bounce just goes away. So it feels very intimate. And then, like you mentioned with color, the palette is a little darker, right? It's total contrast to what's in the rest of the show spaces outside. Everything is very bright, very evenly lit. We've introduced that drama. So again, it's not overwhelming. It doesn't feel overstimulating. And you can be in this space all day like we have during NeoCon, and it feels really comfortable. And we're not doing it now, but during the show, we have music coming through. Like everything is curated through here to make you feel calm, relaxed. Everything is designed in this space.
I'm going to ask you as we walk on to tell me a little bit more about that process of developing this color palette, because I know, we're seeing a lot of color here, but I know that those colors are really carefully modulated as well, and they're based on some amazing research. So can you talk about that?
We worked with an amazing collaborator, Carolyn Noble, and we've worked for 2.5 years doing research to understand color trends, to understand how do you take what's happening in the world affect your color palettes. We focused on kind of creating a cohesive palette that felt balanced across the warm and cool, but also incorporating a lot of really nice desaturated tones.
I love that you're as sensitive to color as you are to sound. And of course here we have that full range of color. It's absolutely fantastic. What a great display. What I like about the space we're in now is that it showcases another thing that Turf is so great at, which is making detailing, assembly, and construction simple.
This is a big focus for Turf, right? So we're trying to demystify how all this works. We feel like if we can provide that information up front, we're transparent and actually helpful, it's going to make for a better product, right? And not just from our side, but from these architects and designers who are trying to do something interesting in their space. we can make that a little bit easier. We're trying to take a lot of the frustration out.
Right, exactly. I mean, we want to make this, as you said, a relatively new field, even thinking about acoustics in this way, not just as sound mitigation, but as really a contributor to a multisensory experience.
Absolutely.
And I think designers are dealing with enough complexity, just understanding that. We don't want to make it hard for them to detail stuff now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's 100% right. Honestly, like, when you think about turf, we are very passionate about it, right? We care a lot. We also acknowledge we are probably one of many specs that a designer has to work with. So why make it difficult, right?
Okay, Faraz, as we walk on, let's talk a little bit about the material that you're using in your product as well. I know that there's a lot of thought that's gone into that. You have a high percentage of recycled content. Tell us a little bit about what turf product is actually made of.
So the actual composition of the material is 60% pre-consumer recycled content, so it's all manufacturing waste, which is actually the component that gets dyed for color. The other 40% is virgin material, so it's kind of white or natural in tone. But whenever you look at the whole palette, right, you're actually incorporating the two at different ratios. So depending on if it's a highly saturated color or something that's a little bit more of like a gray or a lighter tone. So we've had to learn about that process and actually create some of that process with our supplier so that we can maintain that balance while also being able to create a material that serves our purposes, which for turf means being able to use it like a structure, but also like a fabric. Like, you could see these very kind of rigid constructions, but on this side, like, this all starts as a flat material. So we've kind of worked to master the understanding of how this material behaves, and dialing in the right density and fiber content really helps us to kind of create interesting forms that maybe you might not expect from a PET felt, or honestly from any material.
In addition to all this amazing work you're doing on baffles and wall products, you're also working on a couple of other things. You've offered patterned and printed solutions, like we're seeing the ceiling and that wall here right now, but also other products, ceiling products like plaid, which won a Metropolis Likes Award this year. Tell us more about both of those things.
Absolutely. So, wood textures are something very important to us. We realized very early on that we needed to have some kind of finish that really works for more of like a biophilic type approach. But beyond that, it's about creating warmth in a space. So what we actually did was, instead of doing a photograph of wood and printing that on our felt, we actually developed a more math-based approach to that texture. So it's all like starting with kind of fractal noise that we stretch and twist and color and layer that on top of each other so that you actually get something that looks a lot like wood, but it's a little bit more authentic. Something like plaid is a great kind of integration of the two, where you can kind of create this coffered ceiling and you can apply wood texture to it, and it just feels like something completely different than what you might expect from felt. And it kind of fools the eye, but it really creates a warm, inviting space that can be a really flexible tool for architects and designers.
And of course, we're standing under plaid, which you just talked about right here in this space. I think you've created in this showroom some really great demonstrations of how you can start to feel very different in different kinds of acoustic situations. So talk to us about this space, and then let's walk into that little bit of a surprise you have for us back there.
Absolutely. So this space is actually something where it's really fun. We're talking about rhythm. So we've taken like some undulation that's happening in the ceiling. We're bringing that down to the wall, something a little flatter, but you get that pattern. And then on the other side, it's a deconstructed, dimensional kind of pattern that ends up going to an inlay. But again, you're kind of transitioning from something really moody and kind of fun and playful. Now you have a little more evenly lit. You're still playful, and then you transition into another space. So this is actually something where we were very intentional about creating a flow where we're going from the walls to the ceiling, but really we're trying to take you into the next space. And normally this is actually, we have a really curated soundtrack that's in here. And this is something that for me is a really over the top, but I think really easy way to demonstrate what's possible when light, sound, texture, all of those things work really well together. With the right tools, and you have all of these choices made about being intentional about color, being intentional about lighting, being intentional about texture, you could evoke that emotion. And I think this is the perfect demonstration of that.
It's such an amazing space, and you play with light, you play with color, new play with, of course, sound. Thank you so much for
Oh my
taking
God.
us through
Thank
the
you so
showroom.
much.
It's so amazing. I say we're going to sit here and meditate a little bit, and we're going to say bye to you folks. Have a good day. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Avi.